Welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break, a part of the Living Well with MS podcast family from Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity, celebrating its 10th year of serving the MS community. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. Today, you'll meet someone living with MS from our diverse and global Overcoming MS community. Our Coffee Break series invites you into the lives of each guest. They share their personal MS journeys and speak openly about their challenges and victories, large and small. We hope you find some common cause and a source of inspiration from the stories of these very special people. You can check out our show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels or leave a review wherever you tune into our podcast. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to Living Well with MS on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. So, get your favourite beverage ready and let's meet today's guest on Living Well with MS Coffee Break. Welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break number 36, where we're pleased to welcome Dr. Jonathan White as our guest for this, our 100th episode in the Living Well with MS podcast series. Dr. White is a practicing and award-winning medical doctor in Coleraine, Northern Ireland, and also works with Overcoming MS as a medical advisor and event facilitator. As always, your comments and suggestions are welcome by emailing podcast@overcomingms.org. We hope you enjoy this episode's conversation with Dr. Jonathan White, coming to you straight from Northern Ireland. So, Dr. White, welcome to Living Well with MS Coffee Break. And I would say, may I call you Johnny, but I have actually met you and you're a facilitator at a retreat, and I've met you at other events as well, and I've also interviewed you on the podcast. So I'm taking it I can still call you Johnny.
I think I'd rather you called me Dr. White, actually.
Okay,
Jeff,
Dr. White.
No, Johnny's absolutely fine, of course. Yeah, no. Nice to be back, Jeff. Thank you very much for the invitation.
And we're so pleased to have you on the programme. It's this is actually quite a special interview for several reasons. Firstly, you're a very special and vital contributor to RRMS, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. But this is also the 100th episode of the, I haven't actually counted them, but I've been informed, this is the 100th episode of the Living Well with MS podcast series. So this is an important milestone for that. And It's also the 10th anniversary of RMS as well.
My goodness. Well, then I'm extra honoured to be here, Jeff. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's some achievement. 100 episodes of your podcast is absolutely fantastic.
I know, I can't really believe it. It was so yeah, when you were at a retreat, it was all been planning.
100 episodes. Yeah, absolutely. I remember the first discussions about it, and it's brilliant. What is it, 3 seasons now you've done?
No, well, this is the 4th, yeah.
Well, there you go. Even Suicide off now here. There you go. Fantastic. What an accomplishment.
And so the purpose of the Coffee Break series is get to know some of the members of the RMS community from all around the world. So today you are in the hot seat. So could you tell us a bit about your day-to-day life?
So I live on the north coast of Northern Ireland, which is a pretty wild and beautiful and rugged place. It rains a lot, and it's often not that warm. It's also not that cold, so it's not a bad spot to be if you have MS. I have 2 young kids, Angus and Struan, so daily life is pretty hectic for me. Even if I wasn't working, it would be a bit chaotic. So it's early mornings and early to bed. It's I still work 4 days a week for the NHS, so I'm in the hospital doing my real job in inverted commas, which is obs and gynae with an interest in early pregnancy and recurrent pregnancy loss. So that keeps me pretty busy. Every Friday is my OMS day, which is also pretty busy. Lots of different things going on there with answering queries from our community and writing blogs and doing podcast episodes and giving talks and webinars and all sorts of things. So it's pretty hectic there, I have to say. But I always try to make a bit of time for the things that are so important in the OMS program, which is obviously, as you know, the bit of meditation first thing in the morning or last thing at night. And when it's not too boiling hot, like it's been the last week, I like to do a bit of exercise when I can as well, and generally be in the outdoors.
It was possible. Mentioned in the intro and show notes that you are award-winning, so go on, big yourself up. What have you recently won?
Well, that's very embarrassing. Thank you very much. Yeah, so... in April 2022, we had our first Northern Ireland Health and Social Care Awards, and our recurrent pregnancy loss clinic was nominated and shortlisted for Clinic of the Year, which unfortunately it didn't win. But I did win Doctor of the Year and Health and Social Care Awards, which is very humbling and very gratifying, but extremely embarrassing as well. and many people take the mickey out of me many times a day about it still.
Well, you're the best doctor in Northern Ireland, so...
Yeah, it's these sorts of things, you can't be making your own coffee now, and where's the red carpet, and do you think your head will get through that doorway, and all of this sort of stuff. But it's all, I know it's all done with love and affection, I think.
So you mentioned OMS, but obviously you have MS as well. So when were you diagnosed with MS, and could you tell us a bit about the diagnosis? Because I'm guessing it was a little bit different if you're in the medical profession.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed on the 2nd of October 2015. My first symptoms occurred about 3 months before. I was at a friend's wedding. I bent my neck and I had a crazy pins and needles, tingling, buzzing sensation from my sort of belly button down, which of course we now know it was Lermite sign. And I tried to ignore that, but I thought, well, that probably isn't a good thing. Went to night shift the next night, trying to do a cesarean section, couldn't bend my head to look down, which was bad, obviously. And then the day after that, I took myself to my local emergency department and said, I'm pretty sure I've got MS. Was told, no, you don't. You have a slip disc probably, but we'll get you an MRI, which they did the next day, and it demonstrated inflammatory lesions in my brain and my spinal cord. So, I was sent away, told by the neurologist, well, 50-50, might be MS, might not. We'll scan you again in 6 weeks, and if there's any lesions there, we can start treatment, and you've got a diagnosis. So I duly came back 6 weeks later and was told, you've got 2 more lesions. 2 more lesions on that scan was how I was given my diagnosis, as if, us as 2 doctors were talking about a mythical third patient. So it was different, because I obviously had the insight to know that something wasn't right, and I thought I knew what it was, and ultimately, unfortunately, I was correct. And
then they didn't sugarcoat it because you're a doctor?
No, in fact, so I was given the MRI findings sitting in a corridor of A&E by the on-call medical registrar, which is not the way I would choose to break bad news to anybody. And then, yes, I was told by the consultant. Now, and I can't fault the fact that I was seen so quickly. I got my MRI so quickly, and I'm very grateful for that. But yes, I was told there are 2 more lesions on that scan, rather than, I'm really sorry, but you do have MS. Yeah.
So how did you come across the OMS program?
Well, I think probably it was, I can't really remember, but I think it was Dr. Google, if I'm being honest. I think I literally Googled lifestyle MS, and the New York edition of the OMS book, at that time the 2nd edition, popped up, in it as a sort of a picture on Amazon, and I read the blurb, bought it, and I'm not exaggerating to say I think I read it from cover to cover in about 72 hours, and I've never looked back. It completely, it spoke to me as a doctor, as somebody with MS. It made complete sense to me, and I thought, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and I think, I sort of have a sort of scientific background. That really appealed to me, to the evidence.
Oh, yeah. 1,400 references can never be a bad thing. And, to read it, to hear, another doctor, another person with MS speaking so clearly and so passionately about the evidence and the science, it made perfect sense to me. And I thought, this has got to be the way to go.
Yeah, I think it's good now actually having the handbook as well, because the handbook is less.
Absolutely.
If someone's not massively into science, and then it's pitched more at a layperson, but then if you really want the science, and you've still got both books, so you've got the really scientific one.
I've always thought of the main OMS textbook as being a textbook, almost like a reference guide, whereas the Overcoming MS Handbook is just a lovely, light and easy thing that you can dip in and out of. Actually, I loved reading it, and I picked up lots of tips, and it was great to hear from the community itself. And yeah, there are 2 different things I think that complement each other really, really well. Yeah,
but the handbook still gives you all the advice. So if anyone's thinking of the handbook, it's
absolutely.
Yeah. But if you want to look at pages and pages and pages of scientific references, then the
handbook gives you everything you need. It's just, if you want a little bit more, you can really go into it.
So has the OMS program helped you in measurable ways? Do you feel that it has helped your MS?
Well, obviously it's incredibly difficult to tell what my MS would have been like had I not adopted the OMS program, but I can hand on heart confidently say yes, it's absolutely changed my life from head to toe. I'm fitter, stronger. I'm 2 stone lighter. My symptoms are significantly less. Nearly all of my recent, well, yes, except for 4 years ago, my MRI scans have all been completely clear. I'm back at work. I've got a busy social life, crazy family life. I've changed career in a way. I've obviously never planned to work as an advisor for an MS charity, but also I don't think I would have got into recurrent pregnancy loss, which is now a great passion of mine and something I devote a lot of my energy to. And yes, it has completely changed my life, and 100% for the better.
So you mentioned you're a medical advisor for OMS.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a bit about what that entails, how you got involved with that side of things?
Well, so how I got involved is quite a funny story. Obviously, Gary McMahon, who was the first CEO of OMS, who you know well too, Jeff, was put in touch with me by a mutual friend of ours called Greg Hendren, who lives in Northern Ireland, who follows OMS, and very, very courageously basically put his story into our local newspaper to try and sort of raise a bit of awareness about OMS. And I contacted him and we chatted and we met, and he said, listen, OMS are desperate for anybody medical, following the program to be able to speak to that program to the community. And I said, well, I'm not sure, how well I could do that. I've only been diagnosed about a year. He said, no, please speak to Gary McMahon, speak to him. So I spoke to Gary, and he denies that this happened, but I remember it vividly happening, was that he basically said, listen, we're going to start retreats again, and you need to think about whether or not you think you could do them. And basically he asked me to jump off a cliff, and I did without the parachute. I just thought this is absolutely something I need to be involved in and I care passionately about. So we started off sort of talking about how we'd run events with UK-based facilitators rather than getting people over from Australia all the time. And in fact, that worked so well that we had to go out to Australia to help them eventually. But so it started off with the one-day events and the 5-day retreats. So the first thing I ever did for OMS was October 7, 2017 in the Amex event at Brighton Football Club, which was absolutely incredible. That was the first time I'd met the OMS community really face-to-face, and over 300 people. And it just lit my fire. I just thought this is an absolutely phenomenal cause to be involved in, and aligned with what I was trying to do personally as well as my professional background. So I started in that sort of way, and then was able to devote some time each week to it. And so I started answering medical queries coming from the community around the world and trying to help them make sense of issues they might be having with the program. And then George Jelinek sort of asked me to write some blogs on sort of research articles and get a bit of information out to the community that way. And it's just sort of naturally expanded to doing webinars during COVID and podcast interviews for yourself and other people, and advising sort of the charity just with my community as an OMSer hat on, and also my background to try and work out ways forward in various areas and projects and things. So it's a really varied role. It's always changing, and it's always exciting. And I think my motto for it is, if I can do it, my diary's free, I just say yes, which maybe isn't always the best thing, but it certainly is an extremely rewarding way of it's really unusual, career to have alongside that sort of traditional NHS medical career. So it's fantastic, and I love it.
So we mentioned OMS celebrating its 10th birthday this year. So it's a big milestone for the organisation and the community.
Certainly is.
What are your impressions about the work that OMS has done in its first 10 years?
I think it's been paradigm shifting and groundbreaking. That message of hope, of us giving people a sense of mastery, that the traditional description of this condition and how it affects people doesn't have to be that way, through relatively simple things that you can do for yourself. And I just think that came at a time where it was so needed, and in fact now it's needed more than ever. And I'm really happy to say it's being listened to increasingly by people around the world living with MS, but also health professionals who are looking after people with MS. And it's just it's been an incredible rise for such a small charity, just full of really passionate, like-minded people, to now, to have such a global presence. And that tagline they use about being the world's leading healthy lifestyle charity in MS, I think is perfectly apt and really appropriate. I think we are world leading, and our work is just so important and needs to get to even more people around the world who are affected by this condition.
Yeah, I mean, something literally just this week, there was a new member of my RMS circle who was talking about her first meetings with neurologist and MS nurse.
Yeah.
And she said she'd actually been shown the Overcoming MS book by her MS nurse. She had the same MS nurse as me. Now, that same exact person said to me when I was first diagnosed, when I had, through Dr. Google, found Overcoming MS, and said to her and to my neurologist, what do you think about me following this? You know, what I'd be interested in what your thoughts are on this approach. And my neurologist was pretty positive, but my MS nurse said, well, really, I think you've got to live a little, and, you know, cutting out loads of food and doing all these things is, you know, you probably just want to enjoy yourself and while you still can kind of situation. The very same person is now actually advising people to have a look at the Overcoming MS book. So that's a change that's made in 5 years.
That's just a perfect example of you know, a lot of very hard work behind the scenes, but also generally, you know, we're very fortunate that lifestyle and healthy lifestyle in many chronic conditions is getting a lot more sort of headspace, and it's much more out there, much more present than it was when I was diagnosed nearly 7 years ago. And you know, I was told pretty much exactly the same thing. I asked specifically about diet and lifestyle and was told there's no evidence for any of that. And I think that wasn't right then, but it's certainly not right now, because the evidence base now is just overwhelming for, even if it's not specifically an OMS style diet, but the role of, you know, a high quality diet is just irrefutable now, I think, in MS. And it's fantastic to see.
Just in life, I think increasingly.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing, you know, I get queries all the time, you know, do you think this would be sensible for my partner to start and to get involved in, and they don't have MS? And you think, well, the answer nearly 100% of the time is absolutely. What is there to lose? It'll, you know, it supports you in your journey with MS to keep you well, but it also helps to prevent a huge majority of the chronic conditions that kill so many of us and make us sick in the Western world. You know, this is, in my view, has always been a complete no-brainer.
Yeah. So we mentioned that the first 10 years, where would you like to see Overcoming MS go in the next 10 years? Well,
I think I would like Overcoming MS to cease to be relevant in 10 years' time, to be honest, because I don't mean that the charity should fold and we should all go home, but I would like it to be so mainstream that every person diagnosed with MS and people who have had MS for a considerable period of time, and they come to see their healthcare professionals, are told that healthy lifestyle is absolutely key to good health and living well with this condition, and therefore we don't have that job to do, and we could focus on something else. There's plenty of problems to solve around the world, but I would, in all seriousness, hope that every person who is given a diagnosis of MS is told about the recommendations underpinning OMS, and I fully believe that can happen.
Well, no, I think the changes that I've seen since diagnosis, that definitely it's moving in that direction. And it does seem like it. And I mean, I quite like the books of Ranjan Chatterjee, who's a doctor in the UK. Yeah. He's not talking about MS, he's just talking about health. But largely, he's saying follow the OMS guidelines. He doesn't, you know, I don't even know if he's aware of us, but he doesn't mention it by name, but he's sort of eat whole foods, do exercise, mindful,
stress.
All those things that we're talking about. He's saying that this is just for everyone. This is for the whole community.
Absolutely.
And you're going to live a healthier, happier life. So
there's no downside as far as I can see.
No, well, that was when I started it. The only downside was cheese. Quite like cheese.
So did I. But you know what? I wouldn't eat cheese now if I didn't have MS. Couldn't do it.
I don't even fancy it. I think you get used to a different diet, so the fattiness of it, that's sort of like, no, it doesn't appeal.
It's just a habit. You can change any habit. Your new habit becomes the habit. You know, I ate nothing but meat and cheese, and now I couldn't go near the stuff.
And vegan cheese is basically cardboard, so I don't.
Full of palm oil.
No need for that either.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Pizza's better without cheese.
I know. I try and convince someone in America they have pizza. They go, we have vegan cheese. Can I just have it without cheese? Yeah, in Italy, they're fine with the concept. So
yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so one of the things, I mean, so we talk about the sort of pillars of OMS. One of the things, not really one of those pillars, is community, but that is something that's brought up by other people saying, you know, actually being in a community doing these things makes things much easier, much more likely to follow through. So OMS has a very good community approach, and you're part of that fabric of the community. So what role has community played in your MS journey, and how has that been important?
Oh, it really can't be overstated, Jeff. It's so important and so integral that it's something. It's almost like breathing. I don't really think about it now. Almost 7 years in, I agree completely. If there was no OMS 2.0, and maybe one day there will be, community would be absolutely right at the heart of that. Because, I've met just some of the most wonderful and inspiring people since my diagnosis. Now I'm very lucky to call some of them friends. My colleagues, my fellow facilitators are some of my closest friends, even if I don't see them for 3 years, has been the case with COVID. Whenever we hook up again, it's just like there's been a comma in the middle of a sentence. We just pick up from where we left off, and it's just absolutely amazing. It's uplifting, and fills up fills the bucket completely for me. But it's been a wonderful privilege professionally as well to being able to spend some time with people like myself, people living with MS like me, and to hopefully just give them a little bit of information and to clarify some things for them and to maybe steer them in the right direction. And then to see the amazing changes that they implement in their lives, and that is just so gratifying, professionally, to be able to help someone like that. But it's just, COVID is, you don't need me to tell you, has been absolutely horrendous and really difficult for everybody. But for people with MS especially, it can be extremely isolating. And I think that the OMS community has shown itself to be that true force for good. Think about all of the digital things that we've had to do, how we've had to change. And I don't mean officially the charity, but just generally, all the circles meetings that happened online, the WhatsApp groups, the, meeting for digital drinks in the sun, and all of these wonderful, wonderful things that kept you on the straight and narrow whenever times got tough and the night seemed pretty bloody dark, to be honest. And it is just such an important thing. It's phenomenal. I always used to talk, I don't know if you remember, but at the end of every retreat, they would sort of ask you, the one thing you wanted to take away. And my thing was always, to look around you in that room and the sense of becoming part of a tribe, because humans are we're pack animals. We don't want to be on our own, whether we think that or not. And to have that sense of community, a tribe around you, is just an incredibly uplifting and empowering thing.
Yeah, I mean, when I was first diagnosed and came across OMS, there was one other person in the whole county of Devon, which is a big county in the UK.
Yeah.
That I met once and never again. And then the next group of people I met was actually at the retreat where I met you. And and that was just, then it started, and then I it wasn't called Circles at the time, but we sort of had a local meeting, met like a couple of other people. But now I think we're up to nearly, in the southwest of the UK, it's about 50 people, I think. And it's really, really regular. There's just constant chat, and that's a benefit in a way, if you can take any benefits from the COVID thing, was because we had to go digital. That now that won't change. That that will always be there. Now we have had physical meetups now as well, but we'll always have that, that digital side of it, which is really, really good.
Absolutely, yeah, and necessity is a mother of invention. I think that it does make things more accessible and more convenient, and there's definitely still a place for digital. But I love a good old face to face if it's possible. Yeah. So to change subjects a bit, to you as a person, could you tell us a few things outside your medical work and outside OMS that you're passionate about, and any favourite hobbies or pastimes that you have? Yeah. So obviously I have 2 young children. That takes up loads of my time. I love time with them outdoors, enjoying we're very fortunate to live in a pretty awesome part of the country and beautiful countryside and coastline all around us. So exploring that is one of our big things. We love doing that. I'm a big fan of sport, particularly rugby, and I just would have to mention that Ireland are now officially the world's best rugby team, which is, no mean feat. And we did beat the All Blacks twice in a week, so that gave me some great happiness and joy in the last week. So I love watching rugby, and I am quite a keen cyclist. I cycled around Ireland for another charity actually when I was at university. I'm not planning to do that again, but who knows, might do something else on a bike. I find that really gives me a sense of sort of mindfulness and stillness and calm when I'm out on a bike for a couple of hours on a Sunday morning. I don't have anything to think about or worry about. I love reading. I love history, which I didn't at school. Funnily enough, I had to do science at school, so I wasn't really interested in history, but now I love it. I think it gives you such important context for where we are and where we're going, although it seems people don't take lessons from history all that often at the minute. And yeah, I love music and film, and yeah, I think I'm a fairly varied person who's interested in lots of different things. And of course, I love spending time with my friends and my family too.
And with that, Johnny, thanks so much for being on the Living Well with MS Coffee Break and allowing our community to get to know one of its own a bit better. But we do have one last question that we always ask as a tradition on the coffee break. So if you were to tap into your experiences with MS generally and OMS specifically for a nugget of wisdom that might help people, particularly if they're newly diagnosed or they're newly adopting the OMS program, what would that advice be?
Well, I'm going to shamelessly plagiarise somebody who's much cleverer than me, which is what I usually do, as you know, Jeff. Some of your listeners might be aware of somebody called Dame Deborah James, who was a phenomenally passionate cancer campaigner who was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer about 4 years ago and created the You, Me and the Big C podcast, which was just remarkably successful and supportive for people living with cancer, increasing awareness of it. And sadly, she passed away in June 2022. But her very last Twitter post popped up the next day, and it just spoke to me, and I thought, this is just absolute. She's put this so beautifully. This is exactly how I feel about OMS and MS generally. So I'm going to use her quote, if that's okay with you. She said, "Find a life worth enjoying, take risks, love deeply, have no regrets, and always, always have rebellious hope." And I just love the idea of rebellious hope, because that to me is me, and it's me in OMS. That's brilliant. And I think it is mentioned by George Dernack. I think he refers to it as faith, but just that idea, if you have an optimism, if you have a belief, you have hope, then actually it's not just that you feel better, it's actually medically proven to have a better outcome. Absolutely. We always know the best prognostic outcomes come from those with sense of mastery, empowerment, positivity. Absolutely. And it has measurable effects on your immune system, which is never a bad thing when you have a chronic autoimmune condition. And that's a placebo effect. I mean, placebos work. If you give someone a sugar tablet and you tell them it's the world's greatest drug ever, actually, people get a bit better. So placebos are not negative things. We should harness that. That's the mind-body connection. Absolutely. Rebellious hope. Yeah, brilliant. I shall take that with me. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Jeff. Good to talk to you again. Take care. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS Coffee Break. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode, or do you or someone you know want to be featured in a future Coffee Break episode? Then email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS Coffee Break is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. To learn more about Overcoming MS and its array of free content and programmes, including webinars, recipes, exercise guides, OMS circles, our global network of community support groups, and more, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. While you're there, don't forget to register for our monthly e-newsletter so you can stay informed about the podcast and other news and updates from Overcoming MS. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time. The Living Well with MS family of podcasts is for private, non-commercial use and exists to educate and inspire our community of listeners. We do not offer medical advice. For medical advice, please contact your doctor or other licensed healthcare professional. Our guests are carefully selected, but all opinions they express are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Overcoming MS charity, its affiliates, or staff.